Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me for my monthly Facebook Live presentation. It's great to be here. You'll notice I'm not in my office in Calgary this time. I'm in my office in Ottawa. I have to come here for some business. I'm flying back actually to Calgary first thing tomorrow morning because I've got some things to do in Calgary tomorrow evening. So, it's the flights that still connect us are still here, although they take a little more time to connect between cities. I'm sure many of you have experienced that at this point. Nevertheless, the business of the country needs to go on, and I've been pushing this for a long time, how we do need to make sure we're holding this government to account and moving forward with what's good for Canada. But I want to talk about all the things that have happened in the past month here, and I'm certain a lot of you have a lot of questions, so happy to entertain those as we go through everything here. First of all, Happy Chinese New Year, Happy Lunar New Year, 新年快乐, as I say in Chinatown in my riding, a very important part of my riding. It's the second year that we haven't celebrated much at all. Matter of fact, this year I had no dinners to go to, but I still managed to get down to Chinatown and really see the ice sculptures for the Year of the Ox, and enjoyed it as I always do, and enjoyed some food as well. And that's always the best part of cultural things, is the celebrations you have. We also have some things happening. We're able to get out a little more as we're loosening up. And last week I enjoyed the Air Force Museum. I got a special tour and looked at the expansion plans they have down there at the Curry Barracks. And thank you for all the volunteers that showed me around that and showed me their new plans. So there's more things that are going to be happening going forward that are more hands-on for politicians. We get out and meet people and make sure that we're in tune with everything that's happening in the riding. And hopefully we get some more openings happening a lot sooner as well. Happy to look forward to some dinner as well, because I think they're opening up that. They pick a person who's going to come to Ottawa. Unfortunately, this year, because of the pandemic, the dot of the vote didn't happen in Ottawa, but it still happened virtually. So Anna, congratulations on being selected, and I hope you really enjoyed your experience here as the representative for Calgary Centre. And I was glad to sit and meet with you virtually again, but we've met a few times on our own, Anna, so congratulations again. What's dominating our agenda? I think you've seen my agenda has been dominated by pipelines. First, we had the Keystone XL. We had an emergency debate on Keystone XL. That went very well. I'm actually quite surprised at how much that coalesced everybody, not just in Alberta, but across the country. We had a lot of support coming out of Ontario and Quebec about what this means in our bilateral relationship with the United States. And where is the ground now about how we actually exist as trans-border partners in a North American economy. So we have raised that issue very solidly, and it has gained some resonance, but it's been a bit of a flashpoint too. So people are actually really upset that this happened. A lot of money, a lot of time has been spent, including by the government of Alberta. And it was a reasoned investment to actually make this go forward as quickly as possible. Recognize how much money the governments and the industry loses per year because of the differential we receive on our oil in Alberta. Some put that number as high as $16 billion per year that we're giving away at this point in time to our customers. And who are our customers? But United States refiners. So by having more access to markets, having more infrastructure, we would reduce that differential and would end up back in the hands of Albertans, Canadians, the people that are working in the industry. This would be a benefit to everybody. That has been removed one more time. But I've also been talking a lot about Line 5. Now, Line 5 is a pipeline. It's an Enbridge pipeline that goes under the Straits of Mackinac. So one of the big cross points of the Great Lakes from Michigan back into Ontario by Sarnia. It's a huge refining complex, plastic complex, supply chain network that happens because of that refinery in Sarnia. About 500,000 barrels a day are transported as part of the Enbridge network to get into Ontario, and some of it goes further to the refineries in Quebec from there. But it's a very important national link. It's been there since the early 1950s, and it's governed by what's called the Transit Pipelines Treaty between our two nations, which has been around since 1977. It's an international treaty. Right now, the governor of Michigan is claiming that the pipeline is unsafe, although it's never had an accident, claiming it's unsafe because it traverses the water. And it's going to be about a year and a half before Enbridge is actually able to build a concrete tunnel under the lakes to hold those pipes. But again, the pipeline is safely operated for over 60 years. So we're trying to make sure that it isn't cut off in the meantime. It is more of an agenda item than for certain groups than that don't have the interest of the economy of North America in mind. Coincidentally, with the cold snap that happened in the United States this past week, they declared a state of emergency in Michigan. So it worked to our cause a little bit there, because some of the oil egress that happens out of Western Canada through the Enbridge system does end up in Michigan. And they did need the liquid products in particular, the propane, etc., that was required to keep them warm during that period. So we do have some things working in our favor, but we've been pushing the Prime Minister to try and make sure this is raised with the United States President. It is a big issue. There's a deadline of, I believe it's May 12th, for them to actually arrive at this final decision whether this line is cut off, called the easement, whether it's cut off or not, at least in the interim. We don't need that to happen. Oil companies are already making other plans in case it is cut off, but it would be a great disruption to our national infrastructure, to our international relations between the two countries. So expect to hear more on that. It matters a lot. Line 3, Enbridge's Line 3 is also under protest again. I mean, the number of what we call lawfare that happens around these infrastructure expansions right now is endless. And thankfully it's been shut down. So Line 3 looks like it's going to be expanded. That's the main Enbridge line. It carries about 750,000 barrels a day once it's complete from, again, Edmonton and Hardisty all the way to Superior, Wisconsin, which is their main hub in the United States. So this is all ongoing at this point in time. We know that the ground is shifting. We want to make sure that the business we have, everything that we've supplied for decades, and the business relationships Canada has with the United States is maintained. My job is to make sure that the Prime Minister and the ministers around him are pushing those issues as hard as they can with the new U.S. administration. Now, I got some other things I want to talk about as well, because a lot's been happening. Matter of fact, I'm lucky to be on here tonight because we just finished a marathon voting session again. We had 5 separate votes on private members' bills through the House of Commons. And because we vote electronically, we've all got to sit in front of our screens, be present the whole time for 5 whole votes. They gave us a 15-minute break in the middle, but it took about 4.5 hours to do 5 votes. So it was a long session today in the House of Commons after question period and routine proceedings. We're on screen the whole time, and we do have to vote at these votes. This is our job. But you've probably seen me a few times on social media. I've had some interactions on podcasts with the Blueprint out here in Ontario, down in the United States with Congressman John Curtis, and with my colleague in Edmonton, James Cumming, and we actually talked about Keystone extensively with stakeholders in Alberta. So it's been a productive time as far as making sure that the issues around our natural resources industries are continuing to move forward. We also did a lot at committee. There's a Natural Resources Committee that I serve as the vice chairman of. We brought that forth as well as a motion. Of course, it was voted down to actually do a study into how we proceed post cancellation of Keystone XL. But those are part of the tools we use in Parliament to make sure that the government realizes how important these things are. And I really have been a little dismayed at how little attention was paid to these issues at the national level until we pushed them really hard. So that's our job, and we're trying to do our job as effectively as possible right now. There's a few very important issues that have been in front of the House of Commons in the last few weeks. One of which, of course, was the Canada-US relationship. We had an opposition motion, and we carried forward that motion to re-examine all of the relationships we have with the United States. We've already got a free trade agreement with them, but it looks like, again, with the new administration, the ground is shifting. So now there's a full parliamentary committee to look at those relationships between our countries and find out how we move forward on so many issues, including trade, including security, including, of course, COVID and how we jointly respond to COVID, and, of course, respecting the environment and our energy infrastructure that crosses the border between our two countries. And I noticed when the Prime Minister had his meeting with the U.S. administration yesterday that he spoke a lot about many of these things, and he spoke very little about our energy relationship between the two countries. And I think that that's a mistake. You think about how much trade we do with the United States, how much energy trade we do with the United States. Oil alone is about 4 million barrels a day of Canadian oil is shipped to the United States. It is the biggest balance of trade item that we have in Canada. It's worth over $100 billion a year of foreign trade. And that matters because we're importing a lot of other finished goods in Canada. So having a balance there that actually shows we've got money coming in as well as money going out is something that's very important to our economy. The other opposition motion that was acquiesced to by everybody in the House of Commons this week was the motion regarding, and I'll read it here because I want to make sure I get it right, recognizing the genocide currently being carried out by the People's Republic of China against Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims. This is a very controversial issue. We raised it a long time ago as an opposition party to make sure that any issues around human rights were being brought forward extensively. There was a bit of questions in our party around what is a genocide here. And we actually went right to the definition from 1948. And Erwin Kotler, who's a liberal who used to be a liberal cabinet minister, justice minister, he explained very clearly about the definition. And once we'd seen the definition, when you think about what we've called genocides previously, such as the Holocaust, such as Rwanda, some people, the Eastern Europe in the 1990s, but one of the definitions is the sexual sterilization of some of these people, and the evidence that was brought before us showed clearly that that was happening at this point in time in Xinjiang province. So we did move forward very quick with the genocidal comment on there, and it's a recognition of what's happening there. We're trying to move this issue forward and trying to address the needs of a minority group in a remote part of the world. This is something very important, we think, to the world at this point in time, to make sure that these people have representation where they don't have it right now. Obviously, we want to make sure that there aren't all kinds of spillover effects that affect us in Canada, but we have to make sure we put a stand on how one of our trade partners is treating some of its minority citizens. So that was a little controversial as well. However, the vote on the floor of the House of Commons was 266 to 0. So not one MP on the floor of the House of Commons voted against the motion. So the motion was carried unanimously. A lot of the cabinet ministers, all the cabinet ministers, decided not to show up for the vote, and those that did abstained, so the vote isn't counted. That's why it's not 338, it's 266. But a unanimous consent on the floor of the House of Commons across all parties of recognizing what was happening and actually having Canada, along with our partners, the United States, call this out to try and correct what's happening with the minority group a long way across the world. So those are big issues, and those are things that are happening right now that we need to make sure that we're advancing. And obviously my party has been in front and center on that. A lot of the issues that we push forward have low resonance when we start with them, and then once information is built and built and built and we gain the evidence, we end up carrying the House of Commons. And that's the benefit of being an effective opposition. You bring forward evidence, you don't worry about being name called while you're bringing forward that evidence, and this government frankly is good at name calling and shaming. And we need to make sure that we're bringing forward debate and we're identifying issues that need to be addressed in Canada and in the world. And we won't shy away from that. That's our job, and I want to make sure we do that well. As usual, I feel like I ramble on too much, but I'm happy to take all kinds of questions. I know I've received a few ahead of time here that we're going to read out and see how they go, but if you've got more to send in, please send them in. I've got people that are scanning them quickly and they'll pass them over to me. So here we go. First question. Tyler writes in, he says, I would like to use this opportunity to express my deepest concerns over the lack of integrity and moral justice that our federal government has taken in respect to the Chinese Communist regime's treatment of the Uyghur people. Our government has taken an approach of appeasement to a hostile foreign dictatorship by abstaining to vote on a critically important issue regarding the systematic deconstruction of an entire culture. I am a lifelong liberal supporter that can no longer turn a blind eye to the disgusting complacency our government has taken on important issues pertaining to the Chinese Communist regime. Please do whatever you can to restore Canadian values and in turn my faith in this democracy. All right. Thank you very much, Tyler. I think it was the last point I raised there. I appreciate the question. More of a comment than a question, but we are doing everything we can to make sure we bring these facts forward and make a judgment from there and look at how we actually advance the issue and protect the rights of other peoples around the world. So thank you very much for writing in that way. And you can always write to me, and it doesn't matter to me how anybody voted in the last election. I represent all the people in Calgary Centre, so I'm happy to take questions from everybody and make sure I represent everybody, no matter their political views. Thank you. Next question. Patrick writes in, I'm very concerned by the news that the Alberta government is considering sending Alberta back into a lockdown. Can our province really afford more months of lost jobs, shuttered businesses, and social isolation? Well, Patrick, good question. I know this is a provincial, province by province issue. I'm hoping that we are moving through this. I know that when we first entered this pandemic last March, almost a year ago, that we looked at it and we said, this is something historically that lasts around 2 years and it goes through waves. So that's what happened again this fall. It follows the flu season. It was last spring. It was this fall. We have to make sure that we're cognizant that this might happen again and take the precautions necessary to make sure we minimize the effects on our economy, on our businesses, and the people that are working in our society. Because shutting down, it means all kinds of collateral damage, be it economic, be it social, be it mental health, be it education. I think about all our students that have been pushed behind at a young age that are going to have to play catch up on so much of their education. So I'll do whatever we need to do to keep this economy open and to keep us interacting. If that means wearing masks in public, I'll do it. Whatever works to make sure we minimize the spread and keep our economy open, it's something we need to entertain at this point in time to make sure we take those precautions. So you will find me pushing on that to make sure that we do everything we can to keep this open. That's my perspective on it, and I want to make sure that we look at all those options before we just default to shutting things down and make sure we address again where the effects of this pandemic are happening the most. But thank you for the question. Now I've got one from Tyler. It says, thank you for your hard work as the Shadow Minister for Energy and representing our community of Calgary Centre so well. Thank you, Tyler. I have a question in regard to the wage subsidy. I work at a hotel downtown Calgary and the subsidy saved me. However, CEWS is not sustainable for hospitality. It does not seem to be built to actually get me back to work and keep me there. For example, if employees who have been working throughout the pandemic need a day off for whatever reason, I can't pick their shift up because I am on CEWS and would only get paid for that shift and then taken off the support. I want to help my hotel, but can't live off just a shift's pay. Have you heard of any plan to fix the wage subsidy? What are the Conservatives doing to advocate for improvement? Will it actually end in June? If so, what is the plan after that for my industry? Well, thanks for the question, Tyler. And it is a very complex program now. Initially, CEWS gave 75% up to $2,000 per month for employees that were no longer working full time. And the other 25% was something that your employer could pay you, but if you worked more than $1,000 worth a month, you were taken off. So there was a lot, and I met with a lot of the hotel association, and they were managing that effectively. Some people they were bringing back for about $900 per month, and they were still collecting all their CEWS. But still, you think about that, $2,900 a month isn't what you were making before the pandemic. And I agree with you that this pandemic has been devastating for the hospitality industry, for the restaurants. This is not a replacement income for what you had before. We recognize that. The question is, how do we address it going forward and make sure we've got an infrastructure, as in hospitality, tourism, that will continue into the future once we come through this pandemic. But that might be more than a year from now still. We're looking at the horizon here and seeing what the long-term outlook looks like when people will start traveling again, will start participating in conferences and work events where you will be fully employed again. But that is something that we do not have clarity on the horizon of right now. There is a complex formula about how CEWS is calculated now, and it depends on your employer and how much you're working. So, there's a 40% reduction, a 60% reduction, an 80% reduction in the revenue they have versus this time last year. So I can't comment exactly about how that affects you individually, but if you want to give my office a call, we can walk through the formulation together, and perhaps we can actually see where you fit in that equation. But thank you again. Next question. Graham asks, I'm just reading that the Liberals are extending COVID-19 benefits. However, I didn't see anything in there about helping seniors. Have we just been forgotten in this pandemic? We got a one-time $300 when other people are getting thousands. Why are we not being treated the same as everyone else? Graham, and I presume you're a senior, Graham, so I appreciate the question. The $300, and some seniors that had some disabilities actually received $600, was something that was a one-time payment during COVID to pay for what looked like additional costs at that point in time. Additional costs of getting groceries, the additional cost of PPE, personal protective equipment that seniors had to acquire at that point in time. But what the programs were supposed to support was income replacement. So people that were no longer working or that were removed from the workforce and no longer had income were made sure they had enough income to live without a job. So it was really replacing the EI system very quickly and making sure that people, number one, CEWS was there so people didn't lose their jobs, so they stay connected to their work, even though their work wasn't working at that point in time. And the CERB benefit, which is now called the CRB, was there to make sure that people that had no other recourse, including employment insurance, still had funds to pay their rent and their food and get through a period that we'd never seen before. As far as the supplemental grants that have been given to different parts of society, we look at that as something we had to do on a one-time basis, and hopefully that it covered most of the expenses you have at that point in time. But the continuation of just throwing money to different groups in society, I don't think is sustainable. So I'd like you to make the case, if you can, you can write to my office about all the extra expenses you've had through this process, and then we can analyze what the effect of that would be, and if there is a case for actually supplementing the income of seniors beyond that. But I will tell you, my colleagues and I that work with seniors, I was on a meeting with my caucus yesterday on how we address seniors' issues. We do look at the guaranteed income supplement that some seniors receive right now, and we're not sure between the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement that it provides at this point in time what a living wage is. So we're coming to that debate about how much we should be raising. What probably makes more sense than the guaranteed income supplement. So there's further to come on that as far as what support for seniors looks like going forward. Thanks for the question, Graham. Ian writes, I am concerned that Albertans are being arbitrarily detained and forced into isolation centers at the Calgary International Airport. Can you clarify this information and stance of the Conservative Party on this issue? Ian, it's a huge issue. And there is a difference here between where we initially stood on this. We looked at where Canadians are on this as well. And the polls all showed us quite clearly that 85% of Canadians want further lockdowns. We've also got Conservative premiers, Liberal premiers, UCP premiers, NDP all across the country saying stop flying to other places because of all these extra strains. So as much as we want to keep the economy open, we have to address the fact that there are some risks to doing that. And Canadians are at that point now where 85% of them were saying we need to stop travel to foreign destinations. And like I say, leaders in every province are there as well. So the federal government did respond to requests from provincial leaders about how to respond to the new strains that were entering Canada. There is a real issue there, and actually mitigating that was something we had to do. I've been very clear from the beginning that the Calgary Protocol at the airport, which was an experimental program, was working well. The actual spread from travel through the Calgary airport was minimal. So the test was working effectively. It wasn't utilized in any of the airports around the country. And that is something I think would have been at least an adequate solution to addressing people that were having viral spread through travel. There's another side to this discussion as well, and you know it, because I have a lot of friends and ex-business associates that are still doing business internationally. Now, every bit of international business we give up in Canada is something that's going to take 5 times the effort to get back. And I met with officials at WestJet, and they know right now they're bleeding market share to their competitors that are still flying internationally. And that's a shame because they worked hard, they've spent money, they've spent effort building that market, and now it looks the government does not want Canadians flying, so it's saying Canadian airplanes don't fly. You're looking at US airlines now that are flying into Canada, and the business is being done primarily by US carriers at this point in time. That's something, like I say, there's a cost and a benefit here. The benefit, of course, is we are shutting down any strain that might come in, and could that have been done as well with the Calgary Protocol? But the cost of that, of course, is the long-term effects on our international business relationships going forward. I know a lot of Canadians think that it's just about leisure travel, but there was a lot of business travel too. And coming in and going out now, that is happening less. So that's my position on it, but you can kind of see that we also need to make sure that when we take positions on these things, that we are respecting the will of the Canadian people. As I say, 85% of Canadian people want to make sure that the variants are not coming in through our airports. I think we could have addressed that through the Calgary Protocol. Canadians wanted to shut the airports down because they actually see the risk being more than the return. Thank you. Lou sends me a question here. Why was Pierre removed from his role as the shadow finance minister? He has been effectively demonstrating all the wrongs in the Trudeau government. What happened? Well, Lou, thank you for the question, because I have had this question numerous times on social media, on emails. People call me. Pierre is one of my best, if not my best, colleague. Pierre and I talk on many economic issues and finance issues weekly. And he and I, and I've wanted to touch base with him since the shuffle. I know that Aaron shuffled him into a spot we need somebody who's strong, and that's on the jobs portfolio. You take a look at where the Liberal government is right now and where they're focusing their efforts. They're focusing their efforts on environment, and they're focusing their efforts on jobs. Their strongest minister, and I say this openly, is Andre Champagne, and he is now the Minister of Industry. And that's who Pierre is going to face off against as far as how we come through this pandemic and build jobs going forward. The front man on that now is Pierre Poilievre. So as good a job as he's doing at finance, Canadians aren't resonating on the financial issues. You and I are, because we work in finance and we look at the economy on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of Canadians are looking at how do they get employed, pay their bills going forward, and Pierre is the front person on that file now. I think he might have been a little disappointed because he handled that file a little well. As I say, he and I haven't spoken, but Aaron is a very good leader in putting his key people in key positions that we need going forward. So I'm seeing Pierre in the House this week. He's been sharp and he's been spot on at making sure that it's exposed that we need to build jobs here going forward, including in the energy sector. I appreciate that. I'm going to continue to appreciate his work going forward here, and I think it's going to make a huge difference for us going forward into the next election and the rest of this year. But thanks for the question, and thanks for the opportunity to clear that up. Adam writes me, I'm writing you today with my concern towards the current Bill C-21 in regards to the future of airsoft. I, along with many other members of the community, use this sport as a healthy, positive outlet to meet new people and get active. This is a sport I love and have supported and played for over a decade. I would love to hear your opinion on Bill C-21 and airsoft and if you will be bringing this up and voice the objection of the airsoft community has. Yes, Adam, we had an excellent briefing on it today from Shannon Stubbs, my lead colleague on this file, and we are very strong in support of the airsoft people. We need people to actually step forward and tell the government this, because as hard as we push on it, the government always comes back to us and says we're soft on guns. We're not soft on guns. We are focused on making sure that crime is enforced, that we make sure that we go after the criminals, not the law-abiding citizens. Airsoft are all law-abiding citizens. The criminal guns that come across the border, most of them, over 80%, are smuggled across the border. They're illegal guns to begin with. So Bill C-21 targeting legal gun holders is dancing around the real issue about where the crime is, where the criminals are, and how they're accessing their firearms. Deal with the real problem here, we've said very clearly, and stop the flow of illegal firearms across the border. That is our number one way of approaching the use of firearms in criminal activities. So yes, we're strongly behind the airsoft community. Thanks for the question. Benjamin writes, I support a universal basic income for a fairer and faster economic recovery. It will significantly speed our economic recovery, raise wages, and grow the middle class. Your constituents would like to know your position on universal basic income for our national recovery. Do you support a recovery universal basic income? We have lots of social safety net in Canada. What people seem to forget when they talk about a universal basic income is it means a replacement of everything we have, including minimum wage, with something different. So a lot of tearing down has to happen in order to get to a pure universal basic income. Are we prepared for that? Good question. And I've met many groups, some of which say this would make more sense to have one program than to have a litany of programs. I understand that. One of the things that this pandemic has shown is that, contrary to somebody's belief, at some point in time, if you pay people to do nothing, they will often opt to do nothing. Now, that's not true of everybody. It is true of some people in society. We need to make sure that we move forward on ensuring that we're motivating work and not just motivating people to do very little. And as I say, the best part of a proper universal basic income, it would replace several government programs, both federally and provincially. So there's a multi-jurisdictional issue here. If you think about it as dollars per person that would be supported in that effort, it would transcend both the federal level and the provincial level. So you are talking about a very, very big effort here to get to a pure universal basic income. Would it be better for society? That's what the debate is, and it's that whole concept of motivating work versus actually taking care of people. And right now we've got a litany of programs that we think addresses most of that. And let's have that debate whether we do away with those programs and replace them with one solid program. That's the question we have to answer going forward here. Thank you. Bryce says, I'm writing this email to express my support for the boycotting of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. I realize these decisions are often political, and I certainly don't have all the information, but I do believe it's the right thing to do. Okay, Bryce, I appreciate that. There are serious issues around the People's Republic of China right now, and they have been mounting. The detention of the two Michaels in China for 2 years now is something that we need to make sure we're standing up for on a daily basis. And if we think about what is effectively holding them without charges, that can happen to us whenever we enter a dispute. Allegedly, and we strongly believe this, that is retaliation for the Meng Wanzhou arrest in Vancouver for the extradition to the United States. And these things just aren't going to go away. We do believe in a rules-based international order. We want to make sure we enforce that and have good relations with countries that have similar values going forward. We like to make sure that we hear the case, but we also understand the politics and in getting stronger about our interactions with the People's Republic of China going forward. We do know where they are, and we do know we need to continue to turn up the pressure as far as releasing 2 innocent Canadians from captivity. Thanks for the question. Jim asked me, Aaron O'Toole is strong in Durham. Is this proving to be a good Conservative base for the next federal election for Central Canada and even Atlantic Canada? Jim, I'm not sure what you're asking me. He's strong in Durham. Durham is the outer edge of the what they call the Greater Toronto Area. What we need to make sure we do is run good candidates across the country, whether it's in Quebec, whether it's in Ontario, whether it's downtown in the ridings where we don't hold right now, or Atlantic Canada, where the Liberals have been strong for the last handful of years. We need to make sure these candidates are good, and there's actually a broad array of interests across Canada joining the Conservative movement, because we do need to win the next election. I hope that answers your question. That's all I have for questions tonight. I had a couple good ones there. I think that it's really appreciate everybody kind of ask me the questions that are on their mind, and I'm looking forward to what we have to do going forward here. Obviously, we want to continue to advance our cause, but everybody, any questions, please make sure you reach out to me. I've got a riding office. I'm well publicized. If you need to talk to me on social media, please do so. And if you need to set up a meeting, whether it's a business meeting or whether it's just a constituent meeting on some of your concerns, I'm wide open. Next week's a week off Parliament, so I'll be in Calgary the whole week. And I'm looking forward to, got a full agenda already, but I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of constituents. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you next week. What's our next date on this one? 4 weeks from tonight? We'll follow up with an email. Thanks, everyone. Good night.